I'm in upstate New York. I know if you're in New York City, it's so dangerous, or even if you're in California.
I live in the Bay Area, and I live in a city 30 minutes from San Francisco. And as you know, there's been a lot of hate crimes in San Francisco.
One of the main stories that we had was I went to Walmart to buy groceries because my parents told me to. And when I was done gathering my items, I went to the cashier and she said, "Yeah, this line is closed now." I said, "Oh, okay, then sorry." And then all of a sudden, she let in a bunch of white people. So I stood there for 10 minutes. I went mad and got back into the line. And the same cashier lady said, "I told you this line is closed, Ching Chong. Now get away from me. I don't want to get the virus. I have 2 kids. Go back to your home country and stay there." I got sad and offended, so I just left.
For years, individuals around the world have been cast aside, often discriminated against for their beliefs or how they look. Over the past year, there has been a significant rise in Asian-targeted violence.
This is only the tip of the iceberg, as anti-Asian violence has deep roots in United States history. In this special collaboration between the Outspoken narrative and Dear Asian Youth, you will hear stories of anti-Asian violence during COVID-19.
I'm a college student from upstate New York. I'm actually graduating this semester with a business degree. And after this, my full-time job is going to be YouTube, which is really crazy to say, but it's my dream job, so I feel really lucky. I'm half Korean, half white, and I'm born and raised in America. And I was growing up, I think just since I am half Korean and I was born in New York, when I was little, I mean, like my mom would like occasionally like make us some Korean food, but still overall, I don't know, it's kind of sad, but I feel like I didn't even know too much about like my own culture when I was growing up. So that has always been like a little bit of like an identity struggle, especially as someone who just feels like American, but obviously like I'm perceived to other people as just being Asian or possibly even being foreign, I guess. So there's definitely like a bit of a struggle with that.
In my neighborhood, we have a very large white population. So being an Indian child in elementary school, I always felt like a minority and kind of like an outcast. So I feel like a lot of people would kind of make like jokes against my ethnicity and like say things like, "Oh wow, he only eats curry," or "Wow, he's really good at math," and stuff like that. So that's kind of the stuff I remember from my childhood.
Very often, the first experiences individuals have with racism happens at a very young age, and these experiences can have long-lasting impacts on an individual's life.
During my childhood, I never really realized it, but now that I'm older and looking back, I can realize where that pain stems from, because I was called a chink and people would make me like do the Chinese accent, or they would tell me racist jokes. At the time, I didn't know it was not okay, but now I can see how it really affected me and how I perceive the world as an Asian American.
They'd pull their eyes back. They'd ask me like, "Why is your face so flat? Why do you look different?" Or like just because of my complexion, I feel like they would treat me different. I would get left out of like friend groups, because I used to have like a friend group that was like, I was the only minority person, I was the only Asian person in the friend group, and I did just like feel generally kind of left out of it.
When we look at experiences of racism, many share similar examples of microaggressions. Microaggressions are discriminatory acts that perpetuate stereotypes and attack marginalized communities. These include reinforcing stigmas, assuming a person's social status based on their race, or questioning their heritage. These can be subtle and unintentional at times.
Lots of like microaggression types of things where people be like, "Oh, you're so pretty for an Asian person." I was probably in like kindergarten or first grade. Kids would sing different songs where it was like about like different types of Asians, like Japanese, like Korean, or like Chinese people. And it's just like really sad how like even at that young of an age, like kids had obviously like learned those from other people, like probably their parents. People would always be like, "Oh, like where did you get your child from?" And it's just like a weird question to be asked, because it makes me feel like I'm not, like if I would hear it, I'd be like, "Oh, I don't even feel like that's my dad," because people don't think I look like him.
All communities are at risk of microaggressions. Racist remarks and sentiments can be seen in everyday life, and only by understanding where these racist remarks stem from can we foster a better understanding of how to heal, educate, and strengthen communities.
There's a very large tendency of people of color being underrepresented. And as a result, people, even if there's no racist meaning behind what they say, just a lack of representation will cause people to feel that Asians are outcasts of some sort.
A study by the American Psychological Association states, children are capable of thinking about all sorts of complex topics at a very young age. Even if adults don't talk to kids about race, children will work to make sense of their world and will come up with their own ideas, which may be inaccurate or detrimental.
I didn't want to confront it because, if I did confront it, it would become a bigger problem. And I did not want to deal with that as this little Asian American kid. And I guess now I'm starting to realize that these microaggressions have impacted me in a way that I sort of condemn it in a way, like my past self condemned these racist actions. Now what can my future and present self do to stop it, to prevent it?
From our data, we found that we had mostly verbal incidents with 43% of incidents in total. And we also had 21% of our incidents were just online attacks against AAPI youth. And the last major statistic was 26% of incidents were shunning. And so these three big categories definitely represent the types of hate that Asians are receiving. These microaggressions are definitely very prevalent in our society, given the size of them in comparison to the rest of the data.
Looking through history, there have been examples of blatant anti-Asian sentiments within the United States.
Prejudice, violence, and bigotry are all hateful ideologies that are ingrained into the history and institutions of the United States.
Anti-Asian violence towards the East Asian community can be traced all the way back to the concept of yellow peril. In the 19th century, people of Chinese descent immigrated to the United States to seek better working opportunities. The term yellow peril was coined to instill fear in white Americans against East Asians, describing them as dirty, unclean, dangerous, and saying that Chinese workers would disrupt and steal Western jobs, land, and values.
Then, in 1875, the United States passed its first restrictive federal law that prohibited the immigration of Chinese women. And 7 years later, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which would not be lifted until December of 1943, was passed to implement a ban on all Chinese workers trying to enter the United States.
Additionally, the model minority myth invalidates the struggles of East and Southeast Asian women. Not only are East and Southeast Asian women marginalized racially, they are also objectified based on their gender, facing a double-edged sword of both racism and sexism. From 1899 to 1975, specifically during the Vietnam War, Philippine-American War, and World War II, American soldiers were known to sex traffic women, which created a large prostitution industry that continues to impact the East and Southeast Asian region to this day.
There's a lot of stories in history that aren't mentioned in our history books. And I think that's the problem, because we're fed these narratives, and these narratives are told by white people. They're not told by people of color. They're not told by Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people. We don't know these stories.
Up to this day, Southeast and East Asian women are frequently stereotyped as inherently submissive and sexual. This stereotype directly relates to the March 2021 mass shooting incident known as the Atlanta Spa shooting, and is one of the many reminders that hypersexualization of Southeast and East Asian women is a dangerous result of imperialism and colonialism.
There is news tonight about the growing incidence of racist and often violent attacks against Asian Americans in this country. More than 2,800 reports since the pandemic began. The community in Oakland, California, showing its frustration after several recent attacks.
Recently, Southeast and East Asians have faced an uptick in violence. Violence against these communities have risen by 150% in 2020 and by 160% in 2021. The majority of these attacks are happening in New York and California, where there are large communities of East and Southeast Asians. And the causes of these attacks are primarily being fueled by the xenophobia of COVID-19.
January, February of 2021, it became really something that seemed like it was actually like a huge issue. I was just like a mess because I just felt so sad, and I felt it's kind of like the feeling where you wish that you could fix everything in the world, but you know that you can't. So I was just feeling so drained and so sad. And I mean, they're still going on right now, and it's so terrible, but I'm trying to be more positive, still trying to raise awareness about it, hopefully not let it get to me so much that I'm just like emotionally like a wreck.
I was very afraid for most of my friends of them receiving anti-Asian hate, because looking at what the news was reporting, like I guess like during February and March and even April of last year, there would be like constant attacks specifically against the elderly just for their ethnicity or their race. And these really stood out to me, and I felt real fear for my friends, and I just really wanted that to change.
I just feel incredibly paranoid. If I go out, I feel like I have to carry like pepper spray or like a knife, all of these different things just to be safe. My mom is like, oh, you should bring a knife in your pocket, bring a pepper spray in your pocket, like just in case, just because you don't know anymore.
Many individuals are being attacked near their homes while walking on streets or doing day-to-day activities. One of the most prominent acts of violence this year was the Atlanta shooting, where a gunman killed 8 people, 6 of whom were working-class East and Southeast Asian women.
For some of my friends, they were really afraid to even like step out of the household or go to like a supermarket because of just like the frequency of incidents that happened at those places. Our community have had many protests to make people aware of how much Asian hate has risen in these past years and has like manifested into what happened during the shooting. So our community is working to address it, but I don't think it's to the extent that it's necessary yet.
Due to the increased violence towards the Asian community, fear continues to climb. The fear of getting attacked would make anyone wonder, why am I getting so much hate for who I am? Why are the people I love being attacked?
The bottom line is hate, violence, and tragedy is not normal. No one should ever be attacked for who they are, regardless of their skin tone, features, or ethnicity. These foundational aspects of one's being should never be shamed. Heritage and identity should be cultivated, celebrated, respected, and most importantly, protected.
In my family, I think cooking and things like that have been something that like really helps me learn about my culture. I love to talk to my mom about how she felt growing up in Korea since she moved here when she was 12. That's how I feel like I've learned about it from my mom. I am part of the PAL club at my college, which is Philippine American League. It's mostly centered around Filipino culture. So I get to learn about another culture other than my own, which is really fun. It's really, really cool to have cultural clubs like that, just because I feel like they're so welcoming and you can learn so many new things. I do try to definitely incorporate my culture like into my videos. So like I'll do videos where I'm like cooking Korean meals like with my mom or things like that, or watching K-pop with my family. So I try to incorporate it that way. What's also very interesting to me is that despite me being in the US, I think after the US, like the countries that my videos do the best in are like Singapore or Philippines. Quite a huge portion of my demographic is other Asian American girls, which is like so interesting to me. But I also think I think it's really cool because I'm so happy that these girls, for one, are like interact with my videos or like subscribing to me. Like it just means so much to me that hopefully like I can be somewhat relatable to them.
There needs to be continuous active efforts to eliminate hate of all kinds. Wherever it may stem from, hate has ripple effects on entire communities. We must come together to stand up against it and promote healing.
It is not your fault that your identity is politicized and made to be the scapegoat for various other tragedies. You are loved, protected, valued, and heard. Individual and community healing are both processes that take a lot of time, and they require solidarity and support.
Reporting a hate crime right away, speaking up about an incident, advocating awareness in your community, learning more about anti-Asian hate in all forms are things you can do to help prevent future incidents. This year, many Asian communities felt great tragedy.
Sometimes we can all feel powerless. but we must remember that we can take action to stand against hate and violence. The question is, will you join us?